Hello Internet, welcome back to another edition of Eric's Corner with the word of the not so wise. If you like my channel, smash that subscribe button, all that good stuff. Share my videos when you see them on Facebook, so the word of whatever's on my mind spreads. I'm going to talk about doomsday prepping today. It's something that most people feel they just aren't in a position to do financially. I don't have room I don't own 2 acres like you do. I don't have room for extra vehicles, an EMP-proof bug-out vehicle. I mean, it doesn't necessarily take that much. Now, I'm going to use kind of a good example, my own personal situation, but kind of a bad example because it's a more of a rare situation. So I'm at the end of the road almost. There's another 25 miles if you head south and then east as the road turns. So the supply line can be very easily disrupted. I mean, it would not, I mean, it doesn't even take doomsday. It doesn't take a nuclear disaster. It does not take, you know, a supply line down in the States that supplies us with stuff to get shut down or anything. I mean, just a really bad earthquake, a landslide, a tidal wave, anything like that could cut off our supply route pretty easy. An avalanche, you know, snow avalanches between here and Anchorage all the time. So just keep enough supplies just to keep you comfortable for a couple weeks and keep you fed. Yes, you might have to ration and so on and so forth, but you know, each time you go to the store, you can just pick up a couple things. I mean, few bucks at a time. I mean, if every trip you go to the store, you spend $8, are you really going to notice? Next thing you know, you have yourself a couple weeks worth of food. And of course, fresh drinking water. Watch the show Doomsday Preppers. You know, they try to throw in the theatrical bullshit, and I wish they really would have cut it, because nobody that likes that kind of thing is going to be interested in the dramatization and the fake little drills that they do. They're kind of annoying, but and I don't know who the experts are. They keep talking about the experts, and I'll look into it and see what exactly a doomsday prep expert is. And I've watched the whole show a couple times. One of them actually took place in Alaska, and the dude had a fan boat that he would bug out to and then bug up a river, which is, you know, a little extreme, but that's for, you know, bugging out and hiding versus, you know, just sheltering in place. And, you know, you're worried about other people coming to take your supplies, which I'm right on the goddamn highway, which I absolutely hate being, because, you know, I don't want people to know where I live. But, you know, that's part of the reason, even if it's not major, if things look like they're getting ugly, I can still take what supplies I can pack and leave and get out into the woods, and, you know, if it deemed necessary. So the Doomsday Preppers show, one thing I've noticed is they go to somebody's preps and they say, oh, well, I have well water. And so they go, well, you need an alternative water source because you might lose power, the groundwater might come contaminated. Somebody has a river. They say, well, it could become contaminated. You need to have a rain collection system. Somebody has a well, a rain collection system, backup fuel, backup generator to run the well, a river. And then they go, well, you know, all those things could be compromised, so you really should store bottled water anyway. Like, they always had an excuse for somebody not having a good water system. I mean, the only good system to them is having, you know, thousands of gallons of bottled water, which of course would be optimum, but then you don't have, you know, the room for that. So kind of cover some bases, you know, backups to backups to backups. You know, you have well water, great. But, you know, definitely pick up a few cases of bottled water. You know, in an emergency, if you think you might run out of power, fill up the bathtub. You know what? I don't care if it's gross. You're going to be fucking alive. You know, I mean, what's that, 40 gallons of water? Just deal with it. So, you know, like I talked about, you know, if you're like in an apartment, again, it doesn't take a lot of preps. I mean, look how people acted over toilet paper. I've talked about zombie survival tips. It's not necessarily literal Walking Dead. You see how people act over toilet paper. You see how people act every year over Black Friday sales. I mean, imagine when people are really panicking. Imagine when there's a real virus. Like, if you catch it, you're dead in 3 days, and everybody in your house is going to be dead, unless you hopefully realized it before you came home. That's a real virus. Not, well, if you're already sick, it might get you. It's going to be uncomfortable and shitty for a couple weeks. Jesus. that was, not impressed with that that pandemic. I'm glad it wasn't. I'm glad it wasn't You're Dead in 3 Days. I'm very glad it wasn't like what's that movie with Dustin Hoffman, Outbreak. Um, yeah, I'm glad it wasn't like that. But they tried to make us believe it was, and it's even coming out that that whole 6 foot thing just came out of nowhere, so they just all ran with it. And you should have known it was bullshit because you were 6 feet from the person in front of you in the airport. And then you got on the airplane, and then you sat right the fuck next to them. And you should have known if that was really that critical. We wouldn't have been flying anywhere anyway. So have some preps, have some extra fuel, have things that are tradable. Airplane shots of bottles of cheap liquor. They're cheap, very transportable. People are going to be willing to trade some maybe extra food they have for booze. I mean, people love booze. Myself included. I'm not going to trade my food preps for it, so I just try to have some on hand. You would think maybe my dad would have been the one to get me all like doomsday prepper status, but he's be prepared for the small stuff. I mean, generators, extra food, batteries, that type of stuff. But he's also kind of, well, if something bad happens, again, he's thinking like doomsday, like nuclear attack. Well, there's nothing left of the world to bother surviving in anyway, which, yeah, I definitely get that. But again, I'm up in Alaska. I feel like I stand a higher survival rate, unless, of course, there's a total nuclear holocaust, in which case I'm definitely screwed. Yeah, and he asks me like, well, where are you going to go? It's like, well, I've got a few ideas of where I can go. It depends on what's going on. But basically, getting away from the main highway is definitely a big one, because it doesn't matter how well prepared I am. There's only one of me, and I can only fight off so many people. Should things get that desperate. But of course, being where I am, people are going to be very, very apprehensive about coming onto somebody's property when they got a 6-wheel drive old retired Army truck sitting in their driveway, because that is where a gun lives, and a crazy redneck who's not afraid to use them. So, but yeah, do something to kind of prepare yourself. I would say learn martial arts, because you can use that anywhere, but that's really, really hard to do. It takes a lot of training for that to even be remotely effective. I didn't really feel like I was getting really into the groove and kind of figuring out till after 3 months, and after 6 months I was like, okay, I feel like I'm pretty good. And then after a year, it was okay. I really feel like I checked the box of learn a martial art. I talked about weapons. Guns are allowed, depends on who your enemy is. Bows and arrows could be readily available. Don't count on looting, because World War Z would be a good example of how it was. Everybody's looting. Nobody's going to leave there with anything. You're not going to get out of there alive. You're not just going to leave the shopping cart full of groceries. You're not going to go get guns, because the gun store owner is going to lock down his place and start shooting you to try to protect his property until the dust settles. He still has a store left. But of course, in the case of a flood where all that stuff's ruined anyway, I don't know. Again, there's too many variables and too many different scenarios to really have anything lined out. Just anything in general where you can get away from scared and panicking masses is a big one, and have some kind of small preps. Like I have a bug out bag. A single me, I carried that around with me all through my 20s, and it was always pretty close, where I could grab that bag, I could disappear into the nearest woods and probably survive just fine in almost any weather conditions, minus, of course, somewhere in the middle of Canada where it gets absurdly cold. Then I'd freeze to death. Again, just enough firepower to where you can shoot your way out, not necessarily hunker in place and be able to take multiple attackers and multiple sieges to your place. That simply is not going to be there. Unless you have a compound you can go to with 30 other families, and you can take shifts and rotate out, and you have a place you can escape to. But again, can you get to it is a part of it. I would not even try to go through Anchorage either way. If you're north of Anchorage, go north. If you're south of Anchorage, go south. Which again, south of Anchorage, that's going to bring a wave and a flood of people down this way. But hey, we got plenty of room. We really do here. Lots of little spiderwebby trails to go out in the middle of nowhere. But like I said, a really bad earthquake could knock out our food supply and our fuel supply for quite a while. That's why I like having the Deuce and a Half that can burn any fuel, including up to 80% old motor oil. I mean, it's not great for it, but you know, always new motor oil. I can loot. I don't think people are going to go after 5-gallon buckets of oil. But again, relying on looting is not your go-to. It's just something semi-available. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's it for now. Doomsday prep, and you know, have some kind of plan to run away. It's a little bit harder when you have a family of 6. I got to have a lot more resources and so forth. But I mean, if you're just single or even just with a significant other, man, have some kind of plan, have some kind of survival tactic, because oh boy, the inner cities are going to get really ugly, really ugly. I watched the movie Leave the World Behind, and it was pretty disgusting how this girl told her dad. I mean, this is a black family, you know, daughter and father. The mom was on a plane, and unfortunately, we assumed dead. And she says, "Oh, you know what mom always say: don't trust people, especially not white people." Didn't the Obamas like fund or finance or something that movie, and they're putting shit like that in there? Oh yeah, I mean, if that doesn't tell you that Obama's not the Messiah, the one that so brought us together, I don't know. Well, whatever. You're so far beyond convincing anyway. But it had a pretty realistic stuff. All communications went down, and shit just started. Just no explanation for anything started happening. So. I mean, there's a lot of good movies that kind of give you an idea. I mean, I really don't like citing movies because it's not realistic, but some of them have some pretty good ideas. There's this movie called The Road, horrible movie, but basically there's a flash of light and most things are dead. And another thing too, keep moving. Don't think you're just going to go someplace and shelter and hunker down necessarily. Keeping moving. There's a reason early tribes were nomadic, because they followed the food source and so forth. You know, eventually people are going to find where you're at, and if they want your stuff, they're going to get it. And caves are graves. An underground shelter is only good for initial fallout. Of course, storage, you can hide your stores there and, you know, maybe come back to it and sneak. But again, initial fallout, if there's some kind of war or explosion, then yes, but you got to get out of there, because if somebody knows where you're at, they can easily build a fire at the door. And unless you got one hell of a robust modern bomb shelter, they're going to smoke you out eventually. I mean, you know, you got to have a place to use the bathroom, etc. So don't count on that. Count on it for storage and maybe an initial attack of some kind. If you're in the position to have something like that, which would be what I would do. I don't have one, but I would like one. And if I had one, I probably would buy a piece of property someplace nearby and bury it on that piece of property, someplace I could realistically march, you know, a few miles to or something. And, you know, like I said, kind of keep moving, and preferably just drive my deuce and a half right up to it. Even, you know, preferably again, take a size trail, a trail that's just not even broke in, and hopefully I can bulldoze my way there, just because it's an easy way to get your supplies where you're going. So anyway, hope you like the pointers. Hope I was at least entertaining and gave you some good ideas for stuff. But yeah, I hope to see you again. Thank you for staying tuned. Have a good night.